station, Commander Verik Nolth'aan stared out the observation deck's massive viewport, his four eyes blinking in rapid succession, a nervous tic he'd developed during his 37 cycles of military service. The Galactic Confederacy's Deep Space Research Station 42 Epsilon hung suspended against the backdrop of the Varelian Nebula, its aging superstructure catching prismatic light in a way that almost made the obsolete piece of junk look majestic. "Commander, the human transport vessel will dock in approximately 27 minutes, announced Lieutenant Drella, her voice carrying that peculiar harmonic quality unique to the Thrixians. "Wonderful," Verik muttered, not bothering to mask his sarcasm. "Because that's exactly what we need on this glorified scrap heap." A human, he turned, his 4-meter frame casting a long shadow across the deck. "Do you know what humans smell like, Lieutenant? Like bacterial cultures mixed with synthetic chemicals. It's revolting." Drella's facial appendages twitched with amusement. "I've heard they're quite resourceful, sir." "Hey, resourceful? Is that what we're calling dangerously unpredictable these days?" Verik laughed, a sound like grinding metal that echoed through the chamber. "Next you'll tell me the Vreks are just misunderstood rather than bloodthirsty conquerors." The station groaned, literally groaned, as another power fluctuation rippled through the secondary systems. The lights dimmed momentarily before returning to their usual sickly yellow glow. 16 fluctuations today, Verik noted, checking his data tablet. 16. The Council expects us to conduct cutting-edge gravitational research, and they send us a station that predates most of our grandparents. He snorted, a gesture he'd picked up from the last human visitor 3 cycles ago. "And now they're sending us a human engineer. What's next? Training Vraxian slime molds to perform maintenance." Lieutenant Drella remained professional despite her commander's outburst. "The human comes highly recommended, sir. Marcus Reed graduated top of his class at their Earth Space Academy. His specialty is retrofitting outdated systems with minimal resources." "Which means," Verik interrupted, raising one clawed finger, "that the Council has no intention of replacing this station or properly funding repairs. They're sending us a bandage when we need surgery." He sighed, his secondary respiratory organs inflating visibly beneath his uniform. "Fine. Prepare the welcoming protocol. Minimal ceremony. And for the love of the 7 moons, make sure the atmospheric scrubbers in his quarters are functioning. I don't want to smell him from across the station." As Drella departed, Verik turned back to the viewport. Something about this human's arrival made his scales itch. 37 cycles of military service had honed his instincts, and right now, those instincts were screaming that Marcus Reed would bring nothing but trouble to Station 42 Epsilon. Little did Verik know just how right and how wrong those instincts would prove to be. The human ship docked with all the grace of a drunken Tark beast stumbling into its den. Verik winced as the magnetic clamps engaged, sending a shudder through the station's already questionable structural integrity. Announcing the arrival of Earth engineer Marcus Reed, the station's AI announced in that grating, synthetic voice that reminded Verik of his first wife. The airlock cycled open, and there he stood, shorter than Verik had expected. Humans always looked so much larger in the propaganda videos. This one stood barely 2 meters tall, with a shock of auburn hair and a face that seemed perpetually amused. "Commander Nolth'aan." "An absolute pleasure," the human said, extending a 5-fingered hand in their bizarre greeting ritual. "Call me Marcus. I've been itching to get my hands on this beauty for months." Verik reluctantly touched the human's appendage. "Beauty? Are we looking at the same station, Engineer Reed?" Marcus laughed, a short, barking sound that made several junior officers jump. "Oh, she's a beauty all right. Original Harkin 9 support struts. Retrofitted Vulsarian power couplings? This girl's got history, like finding a classic vehicle, but, you know, the size of a small moon." "I see the Council neglected to mention the 16, a distant pop, followed by flickering lights, 17 power fluctuations we've experienced today alone." Marcus grinned wider. "Fluctuations are just conversations the systems are having without us. My job is to become part of that conversation." He winked, an unsettling human gesture involving partial eye closure. Over the next 7 days, Verik watched with increasing suspicion as Marcus integrated himself into station operations with suspicious ease. The human worked tirelessly, crawling through maintenance tunnels, recalibrating systems, and chatting amicably with every crew member he encountered. He actually fixed the atmospheric regulator in Section 7, Lieutenant Drella reported, sounding genuinely impressed. the one that's been making that horrible wheezing noise for 3 cycles. Suspicious, Verik muttered, all 4 eyes narrowing. Nobody fixes anything that quickly. Especially not on this station. On the 8th day, Verik's suspicions seemed validated when Chief Security Officer Crozon requested an urgent meeting. Someone's been tampering with the station's core systems, Commander Crozon reported, his bony ridge furrowing with concern. Subtle modifications to the primary reactor coding, unauthorized access to life support protocols, and this. He displayed a security recording showing a shadowy figure entering the central computer hub during 3rd shift. The human, Verik hissed. The evidence is compelling, Crozon admitted, though not conclusive. The figure's identity is obscured. That very night, as if to confirm Verik's suspicions, all hell broke loose. Alarms blared throughout the station as primary systems began failing in cascade. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, trapping crew members in various sections. Life support flickered ominously. Status report, Verik demanded, storming onto the command deck. Multiple critical failures, sir, reported the frazzled operations officer. Primary reactors gone into emergency shutdown. Backup systems are failing to engage. Environmental controls are destabilizing. It's as if someone deliberately triggered a systemic collapse. Where is Engineer Reed, Verik demanded. Unknown, sir. His comm signature went offline approximately 23 minutes ago. A message flashed across the main view screen, a security alert from the central computer core. Unauthorized access detected. Critical safeguards bypassed. Verik felt his scales bristle with vindication and fury. Find the human, he ordered, mandibles clicking with barely contained rage. I want him brought to me immediately, and prepare the emergency evacuation protocols. This station is no longer safe. As the crew scrambled to follow orders, Verik couldn't help but wonder what was the human's endgame. Was he a saboteur, a terrorist, or simply incompetent beyond belief? Whatever the answer, Verik knew one thing with certainty: Marcus Reed had just signed his own death warrant. Chaos erupted across Station 42 Epsilon like a plasma storm. Emergency klaxons wailed a sound that Verik had always thought resembled a Teslarian swamp beast in heat. Red warning lights bathed the corridors in an apocalyptic glow as crew members rushed to emergency stations. Commander. Gravitational stabilizers are failing in sectors 3 through 7, Lieutenant Drella's voice cracked with strain. We've got crew members floating in the mess hall. Atmospheric pressure dropping in residential quadrant, reported Officer Nex, his tendrils writhing anxiously around his respirator. Estimated breach in 17 minutes unless we reroute auxiliary power. Verik slammed his fist against the command console. Where is that cursed human? Still unaccounted for, Sir. Security Chief Crozon replied, his normally stoic demeanor crumbling. We've swept all accessible areas. Accessible areas. What about inaccessible ones? Check the maintenance tunnels, the thermal regulation chambers, the waste processing. A tremendous groan cut through Verik's tirade as the station listed noticeably to port. Several crew members stumbled, and Officer Pelix actually vomited from her 3rd stomach a disgusting yellow substance that hovered in globules thanks to the failing gravity. By the 7 suns, Verik whispered. He's compromised the structural integrity field. Lieutenant Drella's voice dropped to a terrified whisper. Sir, if that field fails completely, we'll be scattered across half the nebula, Verik finished grimly. Initiate evacuation protocols. All non-essential personnel to escape pods immediately. But sir, the research data will be worthless if we're all dead, Verik roared. Execute evacuation order. Priority Alpha. The next 43 minutes passed in a blur of organized panic. Verik coordinated from the command center, directing crew to functioning escape pods as systems continued to fail around them. The station groaned and shuddered like a dying beast, pieces of exterior plating visibly separating on the external cameras. 92% of crew accounted for and evacuated, Commander reported Lieutenant Drella, who had stubbornly refused to leave her post. Remaining personnel are either yourself, myself, the command crew, or she hesitated. Or what? Lieutenant Verik demanded. Or trapped in sealed sections where bulkheads have malfunctioned. She couldn't meet his eyes, including Engineering Section 12, where we detected Engineer Reed's last known position. Something uncomfortable twisted in Verik's gut, an emotion he hadn't experienced in many cycles. Was it guilt? He pushed it aside. Can we override the bulkheads? Negative, sir. Manual controls are offline, and the automated systems are locked down. We'd need to physically cut through, and there's simply no time. As if emphasizing her point, the station lurched violently. A support beam crashed from the ceiling, narrowly missing Officer Trowell. Commander Chief Crozan's voice was uncharacteristically gentle. The final command escape shuttle is prepped. We have less than 8 minutes before catastrophic failure, according to projections. Verik stared at the station schematic, at the blinking red sections indicating trapped personnel, at the area where a human engineer saboteur or not waited for help that wouldn't come. Plot escape trajectory, Verik ordered, his voice hollow. Transmit distress signal on all Confederacy channels. As the remaining command crew rushed toward the escape shuttle, Verik took one last look at the dying station that had been his home for 3 cycles. Somewhere in those failing corridors was Marcus Reed, trapped by his own sabotage or genuinely caught in an unfortunate circumstance. Either way, Verik was leaving him to die. May your gods forgive me, Verik muttered to himself. Because I'm not sure I will. Commander, we must depart now. Chief Crozan's voice carried an edge of panic Verik had never heard from the stoic security officer. Structural integrity is at 14% and falling. Verik stood frozen at the shuttle entrance, one clawed foot on the ramp, the other still touching station flooring. Behind him, the remaining command crew had strapped themselves in, faces tight with barely contained terror. Ahead lay the dying station, and somewhere within it, a human engineer. Sir, Lieutenant Drella called out. We've received a communication burst from Engineering Section 12. Verik's head snapped around. Reed. Yes, sir, her voice softened. He says he's trapped behind a collapsed support beam. Life support in his section is failing. Oxygen levels at 30% and dropping. Can we reach him? Verik already knew the answer. Negative, sir. The only access routes would require cutting through 3 sealed bulkheads. We'd need at least 40 minutes. We have less than 5. Officer Nex added unnecessarily, his chronometer beeping insistently. Verik closed all 4 eyes, a war raging within him. The human was almost certainly responsible for this catastrophe. The evidence pointed squarely at sabotage, yet condemning any sentient being to such a fate. Commander Crozan said quietly, "The needs of the many. You know our protocols. Patch me through to him," Verik ordered. A scratchy, static-filled channel opened. Heavy breathing came through first, then, "Commander?" That you, Marcus's voice sounded strained but remarkably calm for someone facing imminent death. Engineer Reed. The station is failing. We're evacuating. A humorless laugh crackled through the comm. Yeah, I noticed. Got myself in quite a pickle here. Don't suppose you've got a rescue team heading my way? The station shuddered violently. Warning lights flashed across the shuttle's instrument panel. I'm afraid not. Human. Verik swallowed hard. There's no time. A long pause. I understand. Somehow, that simple acceptance made everything worse. Verik had expected pleading, bargaining, anger, not quiet resignation. For what it's worth, Marcus continued, his voice growing weaker, I didn't do this. Something was wrong with the station before I arrived. I found evidence of tampering in the central processors. I was trying to. A fit of coughing interrupted him. Save your oxygen, human, Verik said. We will alert Earth authorities when we reach safety. Another laugh, this one bitter. Sure you will. Hey, Commander, if by some miracle I survive this, I'm going to expect one hell of an apology. The station's emergency lighting failed, plunging the docking bay into darkness save for the shuttle's running lights. Commander Crozan shouted. Now, Engineer Reed. Marcus Verik said formally. On behalf of the Galactic Confederacy, I regret. Skip the official garbage, Commander Marcus interrupted. Just go, and maybe consider that you're leaving behind the wrong person. The channel cut off as another section of the station depressurized explosively. Verik stepped fully into the shuttle, the ramp rising behind him. As he strapped himself into the command chair, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was making a catastrophic mistake. But there was no time for second-guessing, only survival. Disengage docking clamps, he ordered, his voice sounding distant to his own ears. Emergency thrusters to maximum. Get us clear of the blast radius. As the shuttle pulled away, Verik watched through the viewport as Station 42 Epsilon, his home for 3 cycles, began to break apart in earnest. Somewhere in that disintegrating structure was Marcus Reed, criminal or victim. Verik couldn't be certain anymore. What he was certain of, however, was the cold weight of responsibility settling in his gut like a stone. 30-7 days. 37 miserable, guilt-ridden days since Verik had left a human to die. He sat alone in his temporary quarters on Outpost Gamma 9, staring at the monitor displaying the remnants of Station 42 Epsilon. "You're torturing yourself," Commander Lieutenant Drella said, entering without knocking. She'd grown bolder since their evacuation, more willing to speak her mind. "The inquiry cleared you of any wrongdoing. Protocol dictated." "Protocol can go mate with a Xylaxian dung beetle," Verik snapped, not taking his eyes off the screen. He took a swig from a flask of fermented root extract, his third today. "Do you know what the human's last vital signs showed, Lieutenant?" "His heart was still beating when we cleared the blast radius." Drella sighed. "The station should have broken apart completely, by all calculations." "But it didn't." Verik gestured wildly at the screen. "Look at it. The central hub and 2 extension wings still intact. Minimal power signatures, but intact." Indeed, while Station 42 Epsilon had suffered catastrophic damage, it hadn't completely disintegrated as predicted. The reinforced central command module and 2 laboratory wings had somehow maintained structural integrity, though they appeared dark and lifeless against the nebula's swirling backdrop. "The human couldn't have survived, Commander. Life support failed completely. The temperature dropped to near absolute zero. The radiation from the nebula alone would." "Then why am I still receiving automated system pings?" Verik demanded, pulling up a data screen. "Once every 73 hours, regular as a Chronos clock. Something on that station is still functioning." Drella's facial appendages twitched with concern. The investigation team determined those were residual automated signals from backup systems. "Commander, you need rest. The new station assignment comes through next week, and—" "I left him to die," Drella," Verik whispered, deflating suddenly. "I left him to die believing he had sabotaged the station. But the inquiry found evidence of prior tampering, just as he claimed. Circuit boards with microscopic fractures dating back months before his arrival. Corrupted code segments with timestamps from the previous engineering team." Verik rubbed his upper eyes wearily. What if he was innocent? What if he was actually trying to save the station? And I just left him there. A notification pinged on the monitor, another automated signal from the station remnants. "That's the 6th signal today," Verik noted, straightening suddenly. 6 signals, not one, like the regular pattern. He leaned forward, all 4 eyes widening. "And they're getting stronger. Commander, you can't possibly think." "Prepare my shuttle," Verik ordered, rising to his full height. "I'm going back." "That's insane." "The Confederacy has declared the station off limits pending salvage operations." Verik was already gathering equipment. "Then I'd better hurry before the salvage teams get there." As he packed, Verik couldn't shake the growing suspicion that the impossible had happened, that somehow, against all odds, Marcus Reed might still be alive. "Commander, you should see this," called Officer Pellix from the monitoring station. Her voice held an unmistakable note of shock. Verik, halfway through pre-flight checks on his unauthorized expedition shuttle, growled into his communicator. "Unless the Confederacy High Admiral himself is calling to court-martial me, I'm not interested." "Sir, it's the station. It's lighting up." Verik froze, his digit hovering over the ignition sequence. "Explain." "Our signatures just spiked across all remaining sectors. Environmental systems are cycling up. We're detecting atmosphere being generated in the central hub." Verik abandoned the shuttle prep and sprinted back to the monitoring center, nearly bowling over 2 junior technicians in his haste. He burst into the room, breathing heavily through both primary and secondary respiratory organs. The main view screen told an impossible story. Station 42 Epsilon, or what remained of it, glowed with active systems. Running lights traced the outline of the central hub and the 2 connected laboratory wings. Even from this distance, Verik could see atmosphere venting and recycling through external processors, a deliberate, controlled process, not the chaotic leak of a damaged system. "That's not possible," he whispered, mandibles clicking rapidly in agitation. The main reactor was offline. The backup generators were depleted. The solar collection arrays were sheared off during the structural collapse. Nevertheless, Officer Pellex said, gesturing to the readouts, "We're detecting power generation at 63% of original capacity." Lieutenant Drella entered, her usually composed features tight with concern. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the station. Audio only." "Put it through," Verik ordered, his heart's hammering against his thoracic plates. Static crackled through the speakers, followed by a voice that sent chills down Verik's dorsal spines. "Hello, hello. This is Engineer Marcus Reed broadcasting from what's left of Station 42 Epsilon. Is anyone receiving? Hello? Your favorite dead human calling. Over." The room fell silent. Officer Pellex's jaw membrane literally dropped open. Lieutenant Drella clutched the edge of the console for support. "Impossible," Cruzan whispered from the doorway. "The human should be long dead. Frozen, suffocated, irradiated, dead." "Guess I'll try again in an hour," Marcus's voice continued, sounding remarkably chipper for a supposedly deceased being. "Oh, and Commander Verik, if you're listening, I fixed your station. You're welcome." The transmission cut off. "He's alive," Verik said numbly. "How is he alive?" "Better question," Drella countered. "How did he get systems back online? And where is he getting power from?" Verik studied the sensor readings more carefully, noting anomalies that made no sense. Power signatures that matched no known Confederacy technology. Heat distributions that defied standard thermodynamic principles. And most bizarrely, radiation levels that were actually lower than pre-collapse measurements. "Look at these efficiency ratings," Officer Pellex noted, pointing to a scrolling data feed. "The remaining systems are operating at 120% of manufacturer specifications. That's not just impossible, it's impossible," Verik finished, finding no better word. And yet, another transmission cut through their bewilderment. "Still broadcasting to the void here. If anybody's listening, I've got life support stable in sections C through F. Artificial gravity restored in the central hub. Oh, and I've improved the food synthesizers. They now make a passable approximation of Earth coffee. Again, you're welcome." The jovial tone suddenly hardened. "And Commander? I know you're monitoring. I can see your outpost's signal sweeps. We need to have a conversation about abandoning crew members. I'll keep a light on for you." Verik stared at the image of the partially restored station, a mixture of disbelief, guilt, and growing curiosity battling within him. "Prep my shuttle," he ordered, his voice leaving no room for argument. "I'm going to find out what in the seven hells that human has done to my station." The approach to Station 42 Epsilon was nothing short of surreal. Verik piloted his shuttle alone, having overridden Lieutenant Drella's strenuous objections and Chief Cruzan's thinly veiled threats of reporting him to Central Command. "Sweet merciful ancestors," Verik muttered as the station came into visual range. The structure, which should have been a lifeless, frozen hulk, pulsed with activity. Most striking were the new addition's sleek, almost organic-looking modules attached to the surviving sections. They gleamed with a pearlescent quality that seemed to shift colors as the nebula's light played across their surfaces. "Shuttlecraft, please approach docking bay 3. The others are, still under renovation." Marcus's voice crackled through the comms, sounding absurdly casual. "I've extended a magnetic guidance beam. Just let it do the work. Your Confederacy shuttles always did have terrible handling." Verik bristled at the critique but felt the subtle pull of the guidance system take hold, a system far more refined than the clunky original station equipment. The shuttle glided toward a docking port that appeared to have been completely rebuilt. As he approached, Verik noticed something else. The hull plating around the bay had been replaced with a material he didn't recognize, something that seemed to ripple slightly, almost like liquid metal frozen in motion. The docking clamps engaged with a gentle precision that the original station engineers could only have dreamed of achieving. "Welcome back," Commander Marcus's voice announced as the airlock cycled. "Atmosphere is Earth normal with slight adjustments for your species' comfort. I took the liberty of adding a trace amount of methane. Hope you appreciate the homey touch." Verik stepped through the airlock, instinctively reaching for the sidearm he'd brought against regulations. What greeted him on the other side nearly caused him to stumble backward in shock. The interior of Station 42 Epsilon was transformed beyond recognition. Gone were the utilitarian corridors with their drab gray walls and flickering lights. In their place was something that resembled a living organism more than a space station. The walls pulsed with soft, ambient lighting that adjusted to Verik's movements. The flooring had a slight give to it, absorbing the impact of his footsteps. Like what I've done with the place. Verik whirled around to find Marcus Reed standing behind him, looking remarkably well for someone who should have been a frozen corpse. The human appeared thinner, with a scraggly beard and longer hair, but his eyes held the same mischievous spark. He wore what appeared to be a suit constructed of the same shifting material as the hull plating. How it was the only word Verik could manage. Marcus grinned. Long story. Short version? When you left me to die, I got creative, he gestured expansively. Tour first, or would you prefer to skip to the part where you apologize profusely for abandoning me? Still speechless, Verik followed as Marcus led him deeper into the transformed station. Each section revealed new wonders. Environmental systems that recycled air with perfect efficiency. Energy conductors that glowed with a blue-green light, carrying power through what appeared to be liquid crystal pathways rather than traditional circuitry. This section was completely depressurized, Verik noted as they entered what had once been the main laboratory wing. The structural supports were sheared clean through. Yep, had to seal myself in a maintenance closet for the first week. Built myself a pressure suit from emergency supplies and maintenance materials. Marcus tapped the wall affectionately. Then I started experimenting with some of the research materials that were left behind. The laboratory itself had been transformed into something resembling a hybrid of scientific workspace and artistic installation. Holographic displays floated in midair, showing schematics and data streams that Verik couldn't begin to comprehend. In the center sat a pulsing crystalline structure about the size of a food replicator. That, Marcus said proudly, is my greatest achievement, your station's new heart. That's not Confederacy technology, Verik said, finding his voice at last. Nope, it's better. It's a crystalline fusion matrix that draws energy directly from the nebula's radiation. Converts what was killing this station into what's powering it. Poetic, right? Verik's scientific mind struggled to process the implications. That's centuries beyond our current understanding of energy conversion. Marcus shrugged. Necessity, mother of invention, yada yada. Amazing what a human can come up with when the alternative is freezing to death in the vacuum of space. And these materials, Verik gestured to the walls, the flooring, the strange conduits. Molecular reconfiguration. Your station had a pretty impressive materials science lab. Once I got power restored to it, I started experimenting with programmable matter. Turns out, when you combine certain elements under specific radiation conditions, he trailed off with another shrug. Like I said, got creative. Verik stared at the human, a mixture of awe and disbelief washing over him. You did all this alone? In 37 days. 39, actually, Marcus corrected. The first 2 I spent mostly screaming into the void and cursing your name, he smiled, but there was an edge to it. Shall we continue the tour? I've saved the best for last. Marcus led Verik into what had once been the station's command center. The space was now dominated by a holographic representation of the entire nebula, swirling in real time above a circular platform. The walls displayed cascading data streams, monitoring systems that Verik couldn't begin to comprehend. So Marcus said, casually leaning against a console, let's talk about you abandoning me to die. The bluntness of the statement hit Verik like a physical blow. His 4 eyes blinked rapidly in succession. Engineer Reed, I. Marcus, the human, corrected. After leaving someone to die, I think we can drop the formalities. Marcus. Verik acknowledged, his secondary respiratory organs contracting with discomfort. The station was collapsing. Protocol dictated. Oh please, Marcus interrupted, laughing bitterly. Don't feed me that bureaucratic garbage. You thought I sabotaged the station. You were looking for any excuse. Verik's mandibles clicked defensively. The evidence was circumstantial at best, Marcus finished, pushing himself away from the console and stalking toward the alien commander. You know what I think? I think you were just waiting for a reason to leave the pesky human behind. Easier than admitting your precious Confederacy built a death trap disguised as a research station. That's not fair? Not accurate. Marcus was in Verik's face now, remarkably intimidating despite being half the commander's height. Let me tell you what's not fair. Spending 2 weeks drinking condensation from pipes to survive. Performing self-surgery to extract shrapnel from my leg using medical supplies designed for species with exoskeletons. That wasn't fair, Commander. The accusation hung between them like a physical presence. Verik's claws flexed involuntarily. The inquiry found evidence of prior tampering, Verik admitted quietly. Your claims were validated. Well, that's just wonderful, Marcus replied, voice dripping with sarcasm. I'm sure that would have been very comforting to know as I was slowly freezing to death. Marcus turned away abruptly, pacing the circumference of the holographic display. The nebula's light cast strange shadows across his face, highlighting the gauntness that 39 days of survival had etched there. You know what the worst part was, he asked, voice suddenly softer. Not the cold, not the hunger. It was the certainty that no one was coming, that I'd been written off as acceptable collateral damage. Verik felt something unfamiliar twisting in his gut, shame, raw and undiluted. I was wrong, the commander said finally. I was wrong about you. I was wrong to leave. I apologize. Marcus stopped pacing, genuine surprise flickering across his features. Well, didn't expect that. I'm not without honor, Verik said stiffly. Honor? Marcus laughed, a sharp barking sound. Is that what you call it? You left me for dead because it was convenient. Because humans are expendable in your Confederacy calculus. That's not true, Verik protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Tell me, Commander. If I had been a Thrixian or a Vulsarian, would you have tried harder to reach me? Would you have waited those extra minutes? The question struck like a precision weapon, finding the vulnerable spot Verik had been avoiding since the evacuation. He had asked himself the same question during those 37 sleepless nights. I don't know, he admitted finally. And that uncertainty has troubled me. Marcus studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Well, at least you're honest, he sighed, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. For what it's worth, I probably would have done the same in your position. Self-preservation's a powerful instinct. You had a crew to save. That doesn't excuse. No, Marcus agreed. It doesn't, but understanding it helps. A little. He extended his hand, that strange human gesture that had seemed so alien to Verik just 40 days earlier. I'm still angry, Marcus clarified, but I survived. And I turned this place into something extraordinary. So maybe we can start again, Commander. After a moment's hesitation, Verik took the offered hand. So Verik said, settling onto a seat that seemed to form itself from the flooring, another impossible innovation. How did you survive? By all calculations, you should have perished within hours. Marcus grinned, the expression lighting up his haggard features. You know us humans and our annoying tendency to defy expectations. He pulled up a holographic display with a casual gesture. First 72 hours were the worst. When the evacuation happened, I was trapped in Engineering Section 12, as your lieutenant correctly reported. The hologram showed a three-dimensional blueprint of the collapsing station, zooming in on the section in question. Support beam had me pinned, crushed my leg pretty good. But I managed to drag myself to an emergency supply locker. Found a pressure suit, some emergency rations. Not great cuisine, by the way. Your species apparently enjoys the taste of fermented mineral paste. Verik's mandibles twitched in what might have been embarrassment. It's considered a delicacy on my homeworld. To each their own, Marcus laughed. Anyway, I patched the suit with emergency sealant, pumped it full of whatever breathable air was left, and essentially created a little survival bubble. Used a laser cutting tool to free myself from the debris. But the temperature, Verik objected. Without power, the ambient temperature would have dropped to near absolute zero. That's where I got lucky, Marcus explained. The reactor hadn't failed completely, it had entered an emergency shutdown mode. Minimal power was still being generated, just enough to prevent the coolant from freezing solid. I managed to reroute that power to create a small heated zone in the maintenance crawlspace beneath the backup systems. The hologram shifted to show the intricate power rerouting, a masterful feat of improvised engineering that made Verik's technical training seem elementary by comparison. Once I had warmth and air, I could think. And what I realized was that the station hadn't been sabotaged in the conventional sense. Someone had introduced a cascading failure algorithm into the central computer. Elegant work. Actually, it was designed to make the station tear itself apart through system conflicts. We discovered that during the inquiry. Verik acknowledged, though not who was responsible. "I have my suspicions," Marcus said darkly, before continuing. "Anyway, after about a week of just staying alive, I started exploring what was left of the station. That's when I found something fascinating in the materials research lab." The hologram changed again, displaying molecular structures that Verik vaguely recognized from the station's classified research projects. "Your scientists were experimenting with adaptive molecular structures, materials that could reconfigure themselves based on environmental conditions. Most of their work had failed, but they were onto something revolutionary. The radiation from the nebula was actually the missing catalyst." Marcus's eyes gleamed with excitement. "So I started experimenting. Combined their research with some theoretical work from Earth physics. The result was this." He tapped the wall beside him, which rippled slightly at his touch. "Programmable matter. Material that can be reconfigured at the molecular level using the right energy frequencies. That's decades beyond our current materials science," Verik said, awestruck. "Amazing what necessity breeds," Marcus replied. "Once I had the programmable matter working, I could repair hull breaches, create new tools, even rebuild entire sections of the station. The material actually becomes stronger when exposed to vacuum, forms a crystalline lattice structure that's nearly indestructible." "And the power source?" Verik asked, still struggling to process the magnitude of these achievements. "That was my masterpiece," Marcus admitted, unable to hide his pride. "I realized the nebula's radiation, which was slowly killing me, could actually be harnessed. Your scientists had been trying to shield against it. But what they should have been doing was converting it. I designed a crystalline matrix that captures the radiation particles and converts them directly into usable energy." He pulled up another schematic, a design so elegant in its simplicity that Verik felt a pang of scientific jealousy. "The result is a virtually unlimited power source that actually cleans up the radiation in the surrounding space. The more energy we use, the safer the environment becomes. Poetic, isn't it?" Verik stared at the human with new eyes. In just 39 days, this supposedly inferior species had achieved what Confederacy scientists might have taken centuries to develop. "You did all this," Verik said slowly, "because we abandoned you." Marcus shrugged. "I did all this because the alternative was dying. And I wasn't ready for that just yet." 3 months later, Station 42 Epsilon, now unofficially dubbed Phoenix Station, by its growing crew, hummed with activity. Scientists from across the Confederacy clamored for positions on what had become the most advanced research facility in known space. Verik stood at the newly constructed observation deck, watching a Confederacy delegation depart after their third inspection tour. Their expressions of astonishment never got old. "They offered you the High Commissioner position," Marcus noted, joining him at the viewport. "Again." "And I declined," Verik replied. "Again." The human grinned. "Good. You'd hate all the ceremonial nonsense. Besides, we've got more interesting work to do here." Verik nodded, his 4 eyes taking in the station that had become something beyond what any Confederacy engineer could have imagined. The adaptive hull materials had been fully implemented, giving the structure an almost living quality. Power efficiency had increased beyond all theoretical limits, and the discoveries being made in the new laboratories were revolutionizing a dozen scientific fields simultaneously. All because they had abandoned a human who refused to die. "The Admiralty Board still doesn't understand how you did it," Verik admitted. "Some of them suspect you had help, hidden technology, secret Earth advancements you're not sharing." Marcus laughed, that barking sound that had once irritated Verik but now seemed comfortingly familiar. "The only secret Earth technology I had was desperation mixed with caffeine withdrawal. Amazing motivators, both of them." Verik's mandibles clicked in what had become his version of a chuckle. "I've been studying your species' history since I left you to die. Still awkward when you put it that way." Nevertheless, Verik continued, "Your people have a remarkable pattern. When faced with extinction-level threats, you don't merely survive, you innovate. You transform. Where my people would see certain death, yours sees opportunity. We're stubborn that way, Marcus agreed. Too dumb to know when we're beaten. The station hummed around them, a testament to what that stubbornness could achieve. The Confederacy has officially revised its emergency protocols, Verik said after a comfortable silence. No crew member, regardless of species, is to be abandoned without exhausting all rescue possibilities. They're calling it the Reed Protocol, Marcus said, looking slightly embarrassed. Bit dramatic, if you ask me. Perhaps, Verik acknowledged, but appropriate. Your survival changed more than this station, Marcus. It changed perspectives throughout the Confederacy. Humans are being recruited for engineering positions across our territories. Just remember, Marcus said with mock seriousness, I still expect hazard pay for those 39 days. Verik's upper eyes narrowed in amusement, while his lower ones remained solemn, an expression impossible for humans, but one Marcus had learned meant genuine emotion from the commander. What you've done here deserves more than mere compensation, Verik said quietly. It deserves celebration. Recognition that sometimes the greatest advances come from the most desperate circumstances. As they stood together watching the nebula's colors play across the innovative hull material, Verik reflected on how completely his understanding had been transformed. He had once seen humans as lesser beings, useful tools at best, liabilities at worst. Now he understood underestimating humans wasn't just foolish, it was dangerous. Because when you left a human engineer to die on an alien station, you might just find they'd rebuild it better than ever. And change the universe in the process.